Yeah, let's
Yeah.
move on though to early on after Russia had invaded Ukraine, we had you on because you're one person on the
Yeah.
left who got that call right. And
Yeah.
I'm curious, you have a recent piece here. Can Ukraine's U.S. allies catch up with Ukrainians? I'll just flash this on screen here. What's your
Yeah.
argument in this piece, Carl?
Well, so it's actually very simple, which is at the beginning of the war, there was a lot of, as happens during wars, there was a lot of support for sort of maintaining a hard line. We want our borders back to where they were in 1991, or 1992. Um, we want Crimea back. We want Donetsk and Luhansk back, and so on. And this was the majoritarian position, whether you like it or not. This was the majoritarian position. And so when people, especially like, I would say hawks online are sort of the most, they're a different breed than even like Democrats on the Hill and stuff like that. There are these online hawks, who eh, they they believe with all their hearts they're speaking for Ukrainians, but they have not updated their understanding of what Ukrainians actually want, and that's very important to them. So, today, as you can see on the graph that you showed, um, the main thing to understand about it is that you have these high yellow bars early on representing sort of let's take a hard line and not give up any land or anything for negotiations in the war. Now that big yellow line has dropped down to just 11% last month. 11% of the
Mm.
population is willing to maintain a hard line. The rest of them, 81%, want to look for a compromise solution in negotiations involving other countries. And if you look deeper into the polling at like other polls they've done, it becomes pretty clear what specifically they want. So they want what they call security guarantees, which are, they don't want Russia to just turn around and reinvade as soon as they stand down or anything like that. Obviously, that's going to imply some kind of military presence in Ukraine. I don't like that, but I do not see any other way that this war ends.
Mm-hmm.
They want a military presence, and they're not going to feel safe without it. There have been some interesting proposals put on the table. Like one was a presence involving China and Brazil, for example. So I think that it would be a good idea to think outside of the box in terms of who is going to be stationed there. Russia has said that, NATO nations in the security force is a non-starter. And who knows if that's just a negotiating position or whether that's actually where they're going to draw the line and refuse to make a deal. But I think that really just getting like the UN involved, getting a UN peacekeeping force, that would be one way to deal with it. That's the way that they dealt with it in Georgia, for example. So that's the main thing that they want as a security force. As for territory, which is the big question everybody talks about, um, like, don't kill the messenger on this, but Ukrainians say that they are ready to, they do not want to fight for Crimea or the East. They, overwhelming majority of them say that they are willing to put that on the table. Less of them are willing to put sort of the southern area that completes the land bridge to Crimea. Fewer of them, understandably, want to put that on the table, but still a majority last I checked. So the land stuff isn't a sticking point for them so much as some kind of security guarantees. And again, this makes sense to me. The East, I think it's kind of a foregone conclusion that the East and Crimea ends up with Russia. It's a majority position in those regions. They want to be with Russia, which is very different from the South. where they're still, when they do polling and stuff like that, people still want Ukraine to win. They still want them with Ukraine. So I think that honestly, the best outcome at this point would involve Europe taking the lead, getting Trump out of this as much as possible, because Trump is just going to try to loot as much as possible. These mineral deals are outrageous. Let Europe take the lead and hope that they get the UN involved in security. And whatever negotiations take place. But I don't think, the bottom line is, I don't think that it's Americans' place to prejudge the negotiations at this point and say, no, we aren't even going to sit down until all of Russians have left the country. That's not even what Ukrainians are asking for at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's been depressing to see some of the, because like you mentioned in the piece, there's no recognition of that sort of how Ukrainians feel about this stuff.
I don't know that it's very well known. Part of the problem is, a lot of the polls that I get are on sites that aren't even in English. And I think that people don't know who to trust necessarily. So, for example, this poll here that we looked at, this isn't by some Russian propaganda agency or something. This group is funded by USAID. So you would expect, if anything, them to take the opposite position if they were being manipulative, but they aren't. And you look at the stuff that, say, NDI, National Democratic Institute, which is another, very sort of tied up with USAID and the Atlantic Council and all those groups. But when they do a lot of polls, and every single poll coming out of Ukraine says the same thing, which is that support for a hard line has collapsed. It's been collapsing since 2023. And it's, people don't like conscription is wildly unpopular. I think that if anything hurts Zelensky, that really could. That could end up being his Achilles heel at the end. And there's some, wild video coming out from people resisting conscription. I wouldn't be quick to reject that as Russian propaganda, because I've been hearing, my sources in Ukraine have been talking about this for a long time. I know people who have been conscripted and whose families have been conscripted. I know people who've been hiding from conscription. So it's a really, really terrible situation. And it's just outrageous to me to think of these Americans sitting safely in the U.S. saying that people who do not want to fight anymore actually do want to fight. And please keep this war going on their behalf.
I mean,
and sorry, David, go ahead.
No, I'm just take this where you will, but I'm sorry. The fact of the matter is just most of these people aren't, and this is going to, fuel plenty of anger comments on this video, but they're not thinking about this very deeply. They're asking themselves one question only, which is it right that Putin invaded Ukraine and Russia's taking territory? And they say that's wrong. Therefore, anything, and then that's where they stop kind of considering what's actually happening on the ground, what it means for Ukrainians.
Yeah. I mean, this has been morally grueling for me. Just watching it happen and sort of trying to thread the needle and getting sort of the right moral stance here, because there's so much going on when you both oppose Russia's invasion, also sort of understanding some of the things that led to it, but nevertheless opposing the invasion. And at the same time, understanding that this is not a war that Ukraine has ever had any chance of winning. And that, too, is largely our fault. We never intended to give them the support that they would need to win. If we did, this would be this would be a radically different war. This wouldn't just be, it wouldn't just be a matter of sending over slightly more munitions or anything like that. I assume that we would have boots on the ground if we were actually trying to win this. We would be doing so much different. And so I've never taken seriously the idea that we were in it to win it. And once you realize that we aren't actually trying to win, the question just becomes, okay, then what are we doing there? Are we even making matters better? Are we just making it worse? And I think all we've done is draw it out and made it worse.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when we had Lily Lynch on, I said something like, we are selling them something that we can't actually provide. Like, who told them that we were going to be able to win this war for them based on our track record? And in the back of my mind, I'm worried, like, well, what if there's a breakthrough and they retake a whole bunch of land or something like that? And then I'm on record for saying this. But at this point, it's clear there's no hope. And it was probably clear even then, and based on just my vague looks at the online intelligence or whatever. And it's just like nobody none of those people that are like avoiding conscription can even sell themselves the belief that they're actually going to liberate their country. They're going into a meat grinder.
Yeah, and I will say here I was on Hassan's show a while back, and this was the most controversial thing I said there, so I'll say it again here. Which is, if you are living, say, like out in the farmland of East Ukraine, like out near Donetsk or something outside the city, and your contact with the government is limited to paying bills and paying taxes, and then maybe every once in a while you have a police presence come by. The fact of the matter is, it's not going to change your life very much whether there is a Russian flag flying over City Hall in town or Ukrainian flag. Now, it will in other places. Like there are, for example, in cities, God knows what Russian troops would be doing. But there are a lot of places in Ukraine where it's not even like sympathy towards Russia. They just don't really care like whose flag is flying in the distance. All they want to do is get back to farming and not get killed. And you have to take those people into account as well. You have to bear in mind that there are a lot of people who don't really have a lot to win in this war. Regardless of what happens, they have everything to lose and nothing to win.
Right. Yeah. Carl Beijer, people can follow you on Blue Sky because you've been censored off of Twitter. Is that right?
Yeah. What I was saying was too outrageous for Twitter. They couldn't handle me anymore. So I'm on Blue Sky a bit, not that often. It's a very different site, but if you want to follow me, that's the place to do it.
There you go, and we'll link to your blog, Substack, for everyone to follow. Carl, thanks so much for talking through this stuff.
Yeah, happy to talk to y'all.